I'm still reeling from this movie. I don't know how to start this review. It's All Quiet on the Western Front, the 2022 version, releasing on Netflix October 28th, 2022. You have to watch this movie. I just say you have to watch this movie. Let me tell you more about it coming up next. So, All Quiet on the Western Front, a famous novel from, the 1920s. A famous movie was made about it in 1930. Still a classic. I think I had to watch that in high school. Very memorable, very old movie that is moving about World War One, and it's German participation in World War One. So often in film, in movies, the Germans are the bad guys because they were the bad guys. They're on the losing side in the major world wars. And yet some sympathy, in my opinion, needs to be thrown their way, at least for the ordinary soldiers or ordinary people who get caught up in social forces and in the blind patriotism, idolatrous nationalism, which is depicted in this movie for good reason. Of the start of World War One. This, of course, is a movie about World War One in the German Western Front, as the title suggests. Now, I'm not going to compare this 2022 movie to its predecessors, nor to the novel, but I do recommend memoirs from this period, especially Ernst Junger's Storm of Steel, a fantastic, dreamy, haunting book that this movie reminds me a lot of. And in a sense, this movie is not really a story. It is a ordinary soldier, a young man's experience in World War I on the German side. What it's like to go from being outside the war, being drafted, enlisting, then going into battle. And within 30 minutes of this movie, this kid is devastated. He hates the war. And this movie is 2.5 hours long, so when I was watching it, I wondered, we have 2 hours to go. This movie is already in, telling us how awful the war is, and the character believes that. But I think for good reason this movie is long. This is a very fascinating movie to me in a number of ways. One, its aesthetic choices. I think the director, Edward Berger, whose work is not known to me, but from now on, anytime he releases a movie, I'm going to be watching it because he knows his film history. He knows war movies, and he has put heart and soul into this movie to make it a haunting work of art, modernist and abstract, haunting, beautiful, Tarkovsky-like, a lot of Kubrick in here, but it's wonderful to look at this movie. It's awful at the same time. In fact, given that this is a young man going into the war, seeing what war is really like, modern warfare, I found this movie to be one of the very few war movies that I can definitively say is impossible or nearly impossible to watch as a pro-war movie. I actually made a video on this where a lot of movies which are anti-war can be watched as pro-war movies because in part they're showing battle, which the depiction of battle might actually glorify it just in a sense, even though in context the battle is seen as awful or terrible. In this movie, you cannot, I think, interpret this movie as glorifying war at all. It is nasty, brutish, bloody. Now, the movie has ordinary or stock movie scenes, trench warfare scenes, charging over the trenches, going through battle, encountering tanks in World War I, starving or having no food, suffering through rain, having rats in the trenches. All these things we've seen in movies for 50, 80, 100, it feels like 100 years. And yet this movie is very well versed in movie history. For those who have never seen any World War I movies, it will work very well in depicting this movie is very realistic, or it seems like it. Accuracy, detail to attention for history. I think this is a great movie. But for those people like me who have seen probably every major war movie ever, this movie is a wonder because the director knows all of the war movies. This movie seems aware that there was a 1917, the war movie that looks like it's all in one shot from several years ago. It knows about Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk, Saving Private Ryan, The Thin Red Line. It knows about Stanley Kubrick, and especially his movie Paths of Glory. It knows, of course, about the All Quiet on the Western Front. A bunch of war movies come into this movie and inform it. Every shot, every scene feels like a combo of 3 or 4 war movies, but in a good way. And I was delighted and absolutely, absolutely haunted to find Andrei Tarkovsky, the fractal forest, the haunted woods, sort of like a Brothers Grimm forest here. Of course, this movie's taking place in France. But also, these Russian forests of Tarkovsky that he puts in his war movies, particularly Mirror or Ivan's Childhood, and the movie Come and See, which is becoming ever more popular on the internet, a 1980s Russian movie that is one of the greatest movies ever made, no doubt about it. This movie is informed by the main character, looks a lot like the kid in Come and See. But, you know, all the movies I just named, those war movies, the Germans are the bad guys. And so here you have some comeuppance. I think this movie is a bit political because the French are, in a sense, the bad guys. The Germans are trying to negotiate for peace in this behind war lines. And the French are saying, no, there's no ceasefire. We're not going to do this. You must agree to our terms. So the movie does have reasons why the fighting continued, which are totally nonsensical. I mean, there's the political negotiations in this movie. They should have a ceasefire while those negotiations are going on. They don't happen, and thus you get all the bloody mess and all the people being killed, the characters who are in this movie being killed, and you're asking yourself, why? Why is this happening? And there's no good reason. This is a total anti-war film, in my opinion. For that reason, every politician who's going to deploy troops or has some power over military forces should be forced to watch this movie. I'm talking about this in 2022. There are insane calls for escalations of war in Ukraine, nuclear war even. These people are just crazy, these blue check pundits on Twitter. I don't know what's wrong with their heads. Haven't they not seen Kubrick and Strangelove and Barry Lyndon and Paths of Glory? You know, this movie is in that vein, but it's its own thing. And I think as an anti-war film, it should be watched and studied. And I'm glad it's coming out right now because modern warfare is too insane to participate in my opinion. For all those reasons, in my opinion, this is one of the better, or maybe one of the best movies of the year. It might end up in my top 10 at the end of the year, perhaps. I will be watching this film. I think it will stand the test of time. And like high schools using the 1930 movie, All Quiet on the Western Front, American high schools at least, which, you know, that's a German film, but it's used in high schools. So, too, I think people will be watching this movie. They ought to for a while because it is, in my opinion, very powerful. I am still reeling from it. Now, have you seen this movie? What do you think about it? How does it relate to the older versions of this story? How does it relate to the novel? We can go there, or just as a movie, a work of art in and of itself. What did you think? Let us know in the comments. Please subscribe to this channel for more great content. Thanks and have a great day. Last, just let me highlight one theme, which is food. Food to be consumed. And every soldier in this movie wants an ordinary basic life. They can't get it, so they're stealing food, birds from farms or eggs. And then you see the political negotiations behind the scene, or people on, you know, classy trains, and they're eating this sumptuous food that is not available to the soldiers. The soldiers live in an apocalyptic world where dirt and mud are caked all over them, reminding the soldiers, reminding viewers that we're all dust or dirt, and we will return to dirt. But that dirt man aesthetic, which then these characters become like figures in abstract art, which is a movement during the time of during this time of the early 20th century, an artistic movement grows out of World War I find this movie has a bit of relationship to abstract art or modernistic art of this time period. And the men become dirt in the movie, which is a really serious theme, and they can't get food. Runs throughout the movie and is just as haunting. I keep using that word. It's just as haunting as anything to me. The score, the sound effects are very well done. It's like a haunting Masako Kobayashi movie. It's like quite in. And some really, you know, deep electronic weird tones, some orchestral stuff. The sparse sound in this movie is just wonderful. I strongly recommend you watch this on the biggest screen possible, even though this is coming out on Netflix, and it's going to be for small screens. If you can see it on the gigantic screen of any kind, do it. It's very worthwhile with a great sound system because it's supposed to be affecting in an anti-war way, and it will be.